I am the chair of the collaborative network to end exploitation, who is hosting and putting this webinar series on. So we wanted to open today by acknowledging that we have participants who are joining us from across Turtle Island. Us as the hosts are speaking to you from Toronto or Tekaronto, which has been home to many nations since time immemorial. These include the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. These nations were harmed by the arrival of European settlers who have systematically tried to erase these Indigenous communities and their teachings. Colonialism and racism are deeply entrenched in the Canadian state. And Collaborative Network to End Exploitation strives to decolonize our work and to make a positive contribution to the reconciliation process. I would invite you, if you want to, share in the chat your name, your pronouns, and where you're joining us from. We also want to open today with a labor acknowledgement. We acknowledge the labor and sacrifices of poor and racialized workers on these lands. Canada's settler colonial history includes, among other things, the exploitation of labor of over 200 years of enslaving African and Indigenous peoples, charging an immigration head tax on any person of Chinese origin, agricultural and other migrant workers indentured to their employers with closed work permits. These and other violent practices allowed Canada to accumulate wealth and power. Canada continues to profit from the historic and ongoing exploitation of poor and racialized people. CNEE is committed to redressing this legacy. Just a few housekeeping notes. You will be muted, and the chat feature is on right now, so I see there's some messages there of folks introducing themselves, which is great. Once we shift into the formal presentation part of our session today, we will disable the chat feature just so that everybody can focus on what our speaker has to share. You'll still be able to message the host, so myself, co-host Farka, and our speaker. You'll be able to private message us, and we encourage you to do that if you have any questions. If you have questions for our speaker for the end, you can message us those throughout the presentation. We are recording this session, so you will have access to the recording later. And cart captions are available and can be turned on at any time on the ribbon at the bottom of your screen. Which reminds me, I forgot to describe myself. So I'm in my mid-30s, Caucasian, with sort of curly, wavy, strawberry blonde hair. And behind me is... in true COVID fashion, I'm speaking to you from my children's bedroom, so there are dinosaurs on the wall behind me. All right. Do no harm. This is a 6-part webinar series, so you are welcome to join us for one or hopefully all of these sessions. So we're starting by looking at choice and human trafficking, but we'll be moving on to look at these other areas and looking at areas of intersectionalism as it relates to human trafficking. So I'll make sure once we switch to the presentation section that we've got the Eventbrite in the chat box again. So if you haven't registered for the whole series, you can find details there and you can register for the whole series to get our email updates. A couple of more housekeeping type of things. Assumptions that we are making if you are here joining us today. We are assuming that we're all already familiar with the topic of human trafficking and what anti-human trafficking work entails. So this is not Human Trafficking 101. We're assuming kind of a basic level of knowledge. Our other assumption is that, everyone has come here with good intentions, and because we want to learn more. We want to learn more, know better, and do better in doing this work. But we understand that discomfort is an important part of growth. So you may hear things during this webinar series that challenge you and bring you out of your comfort zone. And we encourage you to really lean into those moments as key learning opportunities. So I'm delighted to be introducing our first speaker today, Dr. AnnaLise Trudell. Dr. Trudell is a gender equity consultant and the manager of education, training, and research at Anova, the gender-based violence shelter and sexual assault center in London, Ontario. She brings extensive analysis of the causes and impacts of gender-based violence and of prevention programming through her doctoral and postdoctoral research at Western University. As manager of Anova for over a decade, she has overseen the facilitation, curriculum development, and evaluation of youth anti-violence programming and professional trainings. She is a seasoned public educator and facilitator with over 800 lectures and presentations engaging youth, professionals, and post-secondary students through public education. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Trudell.
Happy to be here, and always find it awkward to sit through that process. So while I get this up and running, as mentioned, my name is AnnaLise Trudell, she, her, and in terms of sort of how I look today and where I'm sitting, I am a Caucasian 30-ish-year-old woman. I have large hoop earrings and glasses on, a nice pale blue shirt, and I'm sitting in an upper bedroom in my home with lots of picture frames on the walls. So here we are. So I was asked today to speak about some of the work that I've done in collaboration with others, actually some folks at the Sisters of St. Joseph, Sue Wilson in particular, around really complexifying choice. It's not just a theoretical game. This has intentional bearing on how we then understand the impact of human trafficking from an intersectional lens. How choice can't be just thinking about it as being fully victimized or fully choosing something in our lives, but that it's a lot more complex than that. Leah, I'm going to ask if you can mute yourself because I'm definitely hearing a little feedback if you're okay. No, thank you. So I am going to ask you today to put your thinking caps on, sort of get back into perhaps some philosophy class that you ever took at any point, or some of those debates that you would have had with friends. And we're going to start that off with this question. When you think about choice, what does it mean to have a choice? So what does it require? I'm going to ask you to go to Mentimeter. You can either do that by the link I just put in the chat function, or you can take a picture of the QR code on your screen right now, or you can go to menti.com and put the code in that's at the bottom there. I'm going to give you a second to head over there. And then I'm going to shift and show you that. So the link I put in the chat, you can take a picture of the QR code, or you can use that code at the bottom of the screen. So what has to be present for there to be choice? You've put in some answers already. Wonderful. So in case you're not familiar with a word cloud, what this does is it brings to the fore, so it makes it larger answers that are more common amongst others, and sort of smaller answers, ones that are perhaps just a few folks that have said them. I can see in the bottom right hand, as can you, around how many people have answered, so I'll wait a little bit longer to just get a few more of you in there. Things that are standing out to me, options right up the front. Freedom. Ooh, that's a philosophical term if I ever heard one. As is agency. There's information that's circling and knowledge. That really is talking about having an informed understanding of what you're getting into. Okay, one more minute. There's lots of other words that are sort of circling around that are very similar to those sort of front runners. If it would stop moving, I'd be able to read them better, but there's lots around having knowledge or having some ability to understand what you're getting into, so an informed decision, having alternatives, so that would be sort of the options idea. Safety is sort of there. Then there's those more aspirational ones that are around freedom or agency. awareness, autonomy, those type of things. Okay, we're going to move to the next question. So listen to a scenario for 2 seconds. So if we take that front runner one that was really around knowledge, so being able to make an informed decision. If we're talking about the sex trade, how informed does that decision have to be? So if this is the scenario, I am, oh, don't answer yet because you don't know what I'm asking. Don't answer yet. So if I am a 25-year-old woman and I entered the sex trade when I was 14, somebody brought me into that. I was not really aware of what was happening. I became addicted to drug use through that process and sort of retained myself in the sex trade, both by sort of coercion and force and the use of drugs. But at 25, I'm standing in front of you today and I'm saying, I understand what's at play here. I understand how to keep myself safe. I've been at this for a decade now. I understand, the risk associated with this probably better than you do because I've been in it for a little while. And I understand, the cost on my life, that maybe this means that I can't do other things or that kind of thing. Now, answer that question. Is that still a choice? As you're thinking about that, you're trying to assess somebody's understanding of whether that's an informed decision on their part. And what I'm forcing you into doing is separating your own belief system as to whether that's perhaps the right choice, the good choice, and really thinking about, is this 25-year-old woman informed enough to make that choice? I do want to have a massive caveat to that, is that it's pretty gross to actually pass judgment on another person's life as to whether they have choice, especially if they're coming to you and telling you that they have choice or they don't. They get to be the decider of their own lives. But for the purpose of sort of a more theoretical understanding, we're going to do this. So most of you think that that's enough of an informed decision, but a pretty significant chunk of you still believe that, no, that wasn't informed. There's something there that's not sitting well for you. And a few of you are unsure. And in fact, that's good. There's some complexity to this. So when we're thinking about like, how informed does somebody need to be to make your standard of making that informed decision meet their standard of whatever informed decision means? That's really unpacking that being informed is not necessarily a yes or a no, that there's sort of degrees to that effect, both your own sense, their sense, more contextual senses of that. It gets tricky. Another answer that was provided on that word cloud was something really related to alternatives or other options. So I'm gonna, oh, don't answer yet. You don't know the question. I'm gonna give you another scenario. So, here is I'm trying to throw out some demographic details. So somebody who is 20 years old, they're a trans individual. They're involved in the sex trade again. And, it's tricky because you're working with them to try to support them and try to figure out what alternatives they may have, because you're wondering if that involvement in the sex trade is actually choice for them. And there's parts of it and how they're narrating it that don't feel good for them, and they're narrating that. But the alternative to that is not what my alternatives would be. So if I'm involved in the sex trade, I can be employed in lots of different ways and areas. I have a ton of privilege. I have a PhD, I have a postdoctoral fellowship under my belt. I'm a white from mid-upper class background. There are quite a few options that I have. So, what might limit that in terms of my options are the rate of pay, because sure, my family has a mortgage. That would be sort of a consideration for me, for sure. But my degree of alternatives is quite extensive. So I don't know that you could pass judgment on my sort of choices in that regard. But this individual, they're in a very different space. You know, if they go into other forms of labor, they have no post-secondary education, they didn't complete high school education, they don't really have anything on a resume to speak of. They are really worried about how they'll be perceived in the context of, you know, working retail service or at a McDonald's, let's say, because of their transitioning. It's not, they get read as both different genders. They're worried about the violence they might experience in those spaces. And again, they don't have sort of alternatives to lean back on necessarily. And yet, so they're in a rock and a hard place because these don't feel like good options, but there's something about being involved in the sex trade for them that they're not sure about. There's feeling to be risk there as well. You know that because you've navigated through with them moments of violence in that space, and you're trying to determine whether that feels like choice. Go for it. Got some pretty even numbers going on here. So to speak frankly, that's good. That is a very murky, tricky space to be in. So when we put out these aspirational sort of words that we talk about either as freedom or agency or being informed or having alternatives, that's all good. And then when we dig into what that means in practice, it gets incredibly complex. You have to bring an intersectional understanding to the situation that that person is in navigating what their choice is. All right, we're going to flip over back here. So thank you for going along with that philosophical exercise. Some of you may have felt quite uncomfortable in me forcing you into a corner to assess another person's choice. Some of you may have felt uncomfortable because some of your politics and your belief systems really don't align with, you know, there being choice at all in the sex trade, which is not what my belief system is and my values. But we're really trying to break apart what choice means, because in our culture and our society, here's what we think of as choice. It's either one or the other. It's a binary. So it's either fully voluntary, a completely empowering experience, moral, legal, and enlightened. If it doesn't measure up to those standards, the alternative is that something is completely forced, degrading, immoral, illegal, and abusive. Now, to be able to have a life choice sit in the left-hand column means that you're most likely relying on a significant amount of privilege. Rarely do a lot of our choices fit into that column. And yet, a lot of us haven't experienced the full right-hand column. That is a very oppressed, lack of choice space to be in. So most choices and most things that are occurring in our lives sit in the in-between of that. Another way to think about that is a term that's been used in some of the literature called choice biography. So I am the big circle. I've already talked a little bit about who I am. I am a white, mid-upper class, able-bodied woman, highly educated, and sort of have lots of family support in my life to raise my kiddo, so I'm not in that alone. I'm a queer woman, so I have a wife, and that has moments where that definitely sort of limit some of the choices that she and I choose to do, or sort of how much freedom we may have. But overall, when we're assessing moments of choice in my life, that is unbelievably privileged and wide. Other people, very, very, very small choice biography from which they're pulling. But here's the thing. If you're going to say that they don't have choice and you collapse that circle and you sort of say, absolutely not, they're just completely victimized in a particular circumstance, in a lot of ways, we are then reinforcing their victimization. We are taking away any power that they may have as a human and an agential person. So a way to hold the both and being they're capable as a human being, and the life circumstances that they're in right now are so incredibly oppressive and awful and harmful, is to hold that as not a yes or a no, not a binary, not a they have total choice or they have absolutely no choice, but a degree, an understanding of biography through that. Okay, this was quite a bit of theory, but you're gonna hang on with me for a little longer. And of course, I can't read facial expressions, so I have no idea how we're doing. Now, Sister Sue and I, back when, developed a bit of a tool. It's a quadrant. You know what? And I'll show you the end result, which is here. It's called the spectrum of exploitation. And now there's a group of folks, some of who are on the call, who are looking to sort of pilot this, see how this works, and roll this out actually quite nationally. So this is in keeping with what we just did. It's trying to understand exploitation and human trafficking being part of that, but not in a yes or no sort of format. In a, you know, there's degrees to this. There's ways that people's lives are so complex. So when we start with just the vertical column, what we do with that is this is where we understand choice that we've just navigated. So at the top, you know, lots of choice in whatever's playing out. So we use some of the language of work in here at times. You know, in certain contexts of sex trafficking, the language of work doesn't make sense, and I hear that. So just replace that with context. In whatever context this person is in, they feel really respected. They feel like they can grow and learn there. So they have lots of opportunities, alternatives. They have lots of information about the decisions or the spaces that they're in. They're coming from an informed vantage point. Some of your aspirational words around freedom and agency would definitely be present here. As we go down, that choice biography does this. And so some of those situations, you know, from an oppressive context, I'm not accepted for who I am. So my second example of the trans individual would land here. People look down on me. I can't get by on what I earn. I actually can't get ahead based on sort of my earnings. And that's, you know, large arguments here can sort of be situated around a living wage, or a basic income, depending on sort of what policy stream we're in. But this really is where we can start to understand the issues of class, of race, of different identities coming into play. You go down to responsibilities and limitations. This is where we're talking about what often ends up being quite gendered. So childcare, caregiving responsibilities. If you're a single mother of 4 kiddos and your choices are incredibly limited because you know you need to provide. And so you can't necessarily go back to school to then make sure that you can provide better. You may need to lean on sort of choices and alternatives that would not be on your radius of sort of being considered if you were further up on that vertical line. Keep going down, you're getting into a context of how that ends up feeling in terms of feeling used, feeling lied to. This is not what I was promised going in. So that being able to be informed, really starting to come in on you, being controlled. So if I say no to the work, something bad will happen to me. So your alternatives are not even just that they're not as good anymore, or they won't necessarily meet some of your family needs. Your alternatives are actual violence, are actual sort of physical harm in some way. And then punishment and degradation. It's perform or die at that point. So again, we're talking about that choice biography and sort of how those different elements of being informed, having alternatives, feeling good and aspirational and free, sort of are actually a bit of a spectrum. You know, some of us, depending on the situation in front of us, may define the latter 3 as being human trafficking, may only define the latter 2 as being trafficking, or the very last one. Some of us might even define, depending on what, you know, responsibilities and limitations a particular story I give you, might even define parts of that as being trafficking. So the language here for me is not what I'm invested in. It's about understanding more nuance than just a label of that. On the horizontal slide, this is where we get to apply some what sort of might be policy recourses, or what the actual sort of context of the labor or work. So again, for some situations, the language of work and labor doesn't fit. And I want to absolutely acknowledge that. So just sort of remove that, especially in that last column there. If what I'm having to do feels punitive, degrading, I don't get paid, I am punished. We're not going to be navigating word choices. That is absolutely trafficking in that way. But when we're thinking about a context where, let's go to the labor code violation. So my work, it feels really disrespectful in this context. I'm still, earning an income on some level, but there's a lot of drama. I don't feel respected. The working conditions are not good. They don't feel safe in a lot of ways. And I'm not even making minimum wage. And so there's clearly exploitation playing out. There's clearly risk to that, whereby, somebody and what they're experiencing, it's getting tighter in that context. What I think is really powerful about this, though, is that, if you've only ever had working conditions where you've situated yourself in the far left-hand column, bravo, bravo. Because for most of us at some point, and maybe currently, we are in the precarious work column. And that is because of capitalism. That is because, the not-for-profit complex and sort of being underpaid and having to do very complex working of different hours at different jobs to make that all work for ourselves. But many of us have situated ourselves even as the helpers to these issues in this context of having some limited choice. And so we're not, again, in the binary of being like, oh, we're the helper and we're totally liberated and this is the person needing sort of support. This is a spectrum of understanding how those choices play out. So when we're talking about a given scenario in front of us, when we're trying to understand the nuance of it, when we're trying to unpack then how best to enter as a support, both in terms of the policies we may have access to for them, but also what kind of prevention work is really effective here. Prevention work that addresses choice along that sort of vertical spectrum, that is the prevention work of exploitation and trafficking. Looking at how do we go from this to this, both on an individual scale, but also on a widespread prevention scale. How do we increase people's options and alternatives? How do we make sure that folks are informed as they're going in? And then on an individual scale, you have recourse to those types of policy alternatives. So again, from a more political vantage point, there's folks who might, plot an experience that they're working on as right down here, and they might perhaps consider that bottom, right quadrant as being all trafficking. And some people might only consider part of that quadrant as being trafficking. We operationalize that language differently, and it is invariably political. I'm not invested in that. The folks who have designed this have not been particularly invested in that. What we're trying to do is actually call attention to the realm of exploitation and how it really is linked to choice as being more than a binary. So to just sort of nail that home, everything, and many of you will know this, but lots of things get thrown in the bucket of what constitutes trafficking. And so here's a bunch of examples to sort of tell you that we operationalize this definition based on our political understanding of choice and where we want to fall on that. So most of us have our own sort of personal values and lived experience, and we might look at, as white Christian folks, a Muslim woman arriving in Canada to marry a man she's never met, we might think, oh goodness, that doesn't feel like incredibly choice-based, that doesn't make me very comfortable, and we might slap a label on that. That is harm. To do that to another person's experience, whereby have they indicated that that was not their choice? Have we an understanding of why they're doing that and what's important to them? Are we respecting cultural differences there? And so again, this is really coming back to unpacking choice as not being a yes or a no. A migrant sex worker, we know very little to understand anything more than they are a migrant sex worker in terms of assessing choice on that level. Definitely don't know anything around whether that's trafficking or not. A 17-year-old boyfriend convinces her to give his friends blowjobs. A lot of us might feel pretty uncomfortable with that idea, but she may absolutely have chosen that. And that statement will either make you recoil right now and sort of disagree with me so hot-headedly, and that's okay. Or you might be like, yeah, I absolutely agree. But here's the thing. We need to understand the biography of this for her. Does she feel like she has alternatives? Does she feel like she's doing this because she's feeling sort of pressured by him, because there's social pressures at play that we don't know about? But even under all of those circumstances, if she's saying that she's doing this because she wants to do that, we are holding that center for her, because that is her ability to narrate her own lives, to put ourselves in the position of like godlike figures that we know better than individuals in front of us. Is a very risky endeavor. So there's a few other examples on there. A non-Scottish massage parlor worker being paid less than minimum wage. There's absolutely precarity there. There's labor code violations there. There's like lack of access to sort of particular recourses because of being non-status. So we are doing this with that choice biography, but we don't know enough information to know whether that's choice driven or not. I will sort of nail this home if this hasn't become apparent in terms of how I approach this work and how we approach this work, but sex trafficking is not then consensual sex. It's definitely not consensual sex work. And it isn't when any coercion or pressure is present. So those are all parts, you know, where there could be some degree of precarity being brought to that choice biography. By very nature of our policy framework in Canada, being involved in sex work does create some degree of precarity, and there could be danger depending on the context in which that's done and what that looks like. And coercion limits some of that, but that does not equate to sex trafficking. So it's really important to me that in this work, when we're thinking about choice and we're thinking about how we need to bring a much more nuanced understanding to the fore around trafficking, that we don't think about it as being a rescue model. And what we can maybe hang our hats on from this is a sex positive harm reductive practice. Those are words I haven't introduced up till now, but I've really put them into play for you. So the harm reductive practice is actually what, you know, we've asked you to do when we're thinking about choice, is thinking about what alternatives are at play, how informed does this look like, and not trying to assess a yes or a no, but rather trying to understand the pressures that play on a biography of choice. And then your role is to support better and safer choice access, not enforcing one particular choice being made, but having access to better and safer choices to increase that biography. Sex positive. In some of my other work right now with post-secondary students, this is becoming more and more apparent that this needs to be said. Sex positivity does not equal casual sex. That's not what that means. Sex positivity just means that sex is something to be celebrated, that we actually need to do the work of celebrating it to decrease on the other end any shame linked to it. And that just because whatever's being engaged over here in terms of sex is not my cup of tea, doesn't inherently mean that it is harmful. So come back to that example of that 17-year-old. That might feel completely in misalignment with your values. And yet a harm reductive sex positive approach to that would say, pause. We don't know what she wants. We don't know what's at play. And there might be some red flags playing out for you that some of this wants to start squeezing in, but time out on that. We need to know a little bit more information. I want to leave with this, which is a really powerful quote from a sex worker that's working in London. And this is somebody who had experienced moments of significant exploitation in the context of the sex trade, but also actively continues to work as a sex worker. And this is her experience to that effect. In sex work, it was the first time in my life that I had learned about consent and that I felt that I had the power to actually say no. That was hugely empowering. What was not empowering was the judgment I faced and felt from service providers and police. They backed me into a corner of making unsafe choices without being able to reach out for proper safety planning or even being able to talk about a bad date without an "I told you so" attitude. If we're all in the business of empowerment, then we must be willing to accept women's choices that, although taboo, some find empowering. So I will open it up for questions now, which I was told was often what's done here. So comments or questions can either be voiced, if you're comfortable with that, or written in the chat.
Thank you so much, AnnaLise. So I've just turned the chat box back on So folks can start putting their comments there, or you can raise your virtual hand using the Zoom features if you would like to ask a question.
So someone's saying, thank you for acknowledging the importance of harm reduction and prevention work, for sure. I feel like I just touched on it, but you're absolutely right. I'm gonna go with that means a ditto. There we go. Yep. Okay. I agree with that. Connie? I don't know if you know, but you're muted. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, it wouldn't let me unmute at first, and then I tried again, and it worked. I'm wondering if you can, the slide where it says sex trafficking isn't, I wouldn't mind seeing that again, or if you could better explain, because I'm reading it, I kept reading it in a full sentence, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're communicating in that slide.
Fair enough. So it's also really not good practice to do like a negative as the starter, because that confuses all of our minds. So let me just walk through it a little bit differently. So when we're thinking about, consensual sex, obviously that's not sex trafficking. Consensual sex work, also not sex trafficking. Often that is quite a political statement for some people when they hear that being involved in the sex trade and sex work can be consensual and full. So that was sort of a statement that I made. But the last one is the one that, definitely has the most to bring in terms of debate, which is that sex, when there's any amount of coercion present, does not necessarily mean it's sex trafficking. Does that mean that there's exploitation or harm? Very much so, possibly. But just because there's a sense of pressure and that, choice then is not fully consensual or fully sort of liberated, doesn't equate to the opposite end of it being sex trafficking. Follow-up question, Connie.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify, we're talking about 18 and older.
Yeah, well, we can be. So let's talk about under 18. Give me a scenario that's giving
so
you.
Yeah, that was where I was concerned with looking at a child under a youth under the age of 18 and saying it's not child exploitation or sex trafficking when they're not an adult and they're engaging in what could be considered consent or pressured consent. I guess I would like to get your thoughts on that if you see a difference.
So what we know in terms of our consent legislation, some of you know this, so apologies because I'm stepping into teacher mode on this. From our legislation, that you can consent to sex at the age of 12 with somebody who's 2 years older than you. So 12 and 13-year-olds can indeed consent to sex. 14 and 15-year-olds can consent to sex with someone who's 5 years older, and 16 above, there's no longer an age bracket, but between 16 and 18, you cannot consent to sex for purchase. That is sort of wrapped up in some of that consent understanding. Consent, regardless of age, whether you're 18, 16, 12, the definition of consent remains present and sort of the same. So when you're thinking about coercion, that's a tricky space for a 25-year-old as it is for a 12-year-old. And we can feel really uncomfortable right now as I'm narrating this, absolutely. But part of those age brackets have been to limit some of that harm, to say, the ability of a 13-year-old to coerce a 12-year-old is much, much less harmful than it is to have a 30-year-old coercing a 12-year-old. There's different choices at play, or lack of choices when we have that age differential. So when we're thinking about coercion or pressure, let's say, that absolutely shouldn't be present in the context of really good consent. And yet, an example that we often use in consent education is, at some point in our sexual lives, most of us have been convinced into sex, because rarely are all people involved in the sexual encounter equally as into doing it. So often somebody's doing quite a bit of convincing or some convincing. And so where does that line come in between being convinced into something that at first I maybe wasn't quite as in the mood to, and feeling quite pressured into doing it to the point of being coerced and having something held over me? That line is blurry at times and can get quite tricky. I would have a lot of red flags for a 12-year-old around that because of their ability to navigate informed decision making around that, to think through what the impact of that, to have alternatives in the context of our culture, to be able to tell adults about this and not feel shame that they're sexually active. But I would be reticent to tell you right off the hop that that 12-year-old doesn't have any choice in the matter. Someone put in there at some point, Kathleen, thank you. What about recognizing the autonomy of teenagers? Teenagers and youth have sexual autonomy. And we need to be really careful when we're thinking about choice, not sort of having, 16 or 18 as these cutoff points where anything below that is inherently harmful or has sort of perhaps different standards applied to it. I feel like I just went on a little bit of a soapbox, so my apologies, but hopefully some of that was helpful. Leah, have you been tracking the comments? Because I have not.
Yeah, Varga's copying them over for me. So one of the other questions we've had is about the spectrum of exploitation. Is it shareable, and has it been applied to screening tools?
Great question. So it's a 3-year wage grant that we're in the process where we're just sort of finalizing it with a small group of folks from really different lived experience and vantage points. And then we're going to move it and roll out in the fall. That will include it being on a website where folks can either sort of go in as individuals and sort of answer questions that help plot them on there and help better understand their own experience, but it also will be accessible to helpers and service providers as something that can either be used in the context of like a counseling engagement or a clinical setting to help better understand and validate a person's experience. We haven't got it to the point of being used as a screening tool at intake for most settings. The reason being, it's pretty extensive. And so, for example, in the context of gender-based violence or VW shelter as a screening tool, it's much too long to really work its way through in that sort of moment of intake and time. So in some instances, it might be helpful to be a screening tool, but in many, I think not. All of that to say, I will definitely put it Leah's way. VARCA is on our committee, actually our advisory committee. So perhaps it can be shared through this network later in the summer, fall.
Yeah, if you're happy to share it with us, as long as you're registered then for the Eventbrite page, that means that we have your email address, so we can send that out to folks who are registered. Another question that we've had is, did you provide a definition for sex trafficking? If not, are you able to?
I did not, and I did not quite intentionally, so I am not going to. And I'm sorry to that person. But the reason being is that, to be able to sort of have that label is often quite helpful for an individual to feel validated. It can be helpful in the context of the criminal justice system. So there is a definition there for that, and we can access that. But in terms of feeling validated by that label, okay. And if they feel validated, then that can be quite a broad understanding based on their own need of that label. What I really want to understand is what are the dynamics at play in given scenarios, because scenario A and scenario B, say both survivors want to use the label of sex trafficking, that's wonderful. And they're both very different. So it actually doesn't help us understand the nuance of the issue and prevent it unless we get into the weeds of that. So part of this tool has been to do that.
Great. Yeah, it's so tempting to want to have like clear, definable parameters. And I think you've done a great job of showing how it's not that straightforward. So I have another question here. For those who have a different political understanding or mindset of choice and agency, clouded by the typical victim perspective, oppressed, vulnerable, etc. How can we approach them and hopefully bring to their attention that there is a wide spectrum regarding circumstances, choices, and personal decisions?
Oh, that's such a good question. That's why this presentation was originally developed a few years ago, where I started to sort of try to find a way of like working through a harm reduction understanding of choice. And so doing what I did to you, which is putting people a bit in the corner to ask like, okay, well, what has to be present for choice to be there? Name me your variables. And then I will unpack those variables for you and tell you that even the variable of like alternatives, it's gray. The variable of being informed, it's gray. And so working through that analysis to get to the point of sort of understanding then that we can't look at any given scenario as black and white. You're welcome to the presentation if that's helpful, and I can send that as a PDF to Leah. But if it was a really easy answer, I don't have it yet.
Thank you. Just saying, I don't see. I think those were all of the questions that have gone in the chat box so far. Anyone, again, if anyone wants to, you can raise your virtual hand if you want to speak up, or you can put comments there. Again, a reminder, this is being recorded, so you can go back. I'm sure that for myself that I'll be rewatching this and probably taking a little different snippet from it each time. So I'll just give it another minute if folks have more questions.
Oh, I see. Kuma?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, so I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to give a little bit of a thank you. So I'm a stateless person. I'm a formerly trafficked child, and I am a current sex worker. I also work with several different organizations, both with trafficking and sex work. And I sit through a lot of these presentations, and I often have to give some pretty harsh feedback. And this is definitely one of the better presentations that I've seen. And so I just wanted to really encourage anyone who is sitting in on this and maybe kind of questioning whether or not, like, what, especially if this challenges your thoughts, because a lot of times there are no, people with this life experience involved in some of these presentations, or like the opportunity for us to give feedback or stuff like that. But I really, really appreciate this presentation. I think it's a lot of really great information. Especially the kind of discussion of biographies and having like the grid system instead of a binary, this is good, this is bad, this is this is that. Like, life does not look like that. And so we really, really, if you're someone who works with people with these sort of life experiences, this is incredibly helpful. And again, like, thank you. And I'm definitely willing and available to have further discussions if my input is helpful to you, or to this organization. But thanks again, and I just really wanted to be able to put my voice out there and tell you this and everyone else that was on there. That's it.
Goodness, thank you. That really just made my day. I am going to put my email in the chat function. I would love to be connected, Kuma, if that's something you're open to, and getting your feedback, and as well as others. If there's a need, reach out.
Yeah, so AnnaLise, we can include your email then as well when we send out the PowerPoint presentation to everyone who's registered. If anyone has any troubles with that process, you can just do the contact us through the Eventbrite, and we'll make those connections as well. And I think that is a really great way to wrap up our session today. I'm seeing lots of comments coming through, lots of gratitude and appreciation for helping everyone to expand their horizons and think about this in a new way. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you to all of our participants for taking the time out to listen today, and hopefully we will see you next week for our next session. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
To start